Hello, everyone. My name is Len Tetta. I am the Collage Fellow for the 23-24 season. And today I have the great honor and pleasure to talk to the composer Len Tetta, whose work A Conversation You Cannot Hear will be performed by Collage New Music on Sunday, April 21st at 8 p.m. at Killian Hall. Len, how are you doing tonight? I'm doing quite well, and how are you? I'm doing great as well. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to me about your piece. I can't wait to learn more about it and eventually hear it. So tell me a little bit about where this piece came from, the idea, the genesis. Give me the rundown. Sure. So the origin of this piece started in a class I took at BU with the amazing theory professor Jason Yust, and it was a class based around composers who also were prominent writers about theory. And the final project for the class was to write a piece that incorporated the theoretical ideas of two of the composers we'd looked at. And the two composers that I chose for that were Elliott Carter and Fred Laerdal. Fred Laerdal, who Collage New Music performed on their last concert. So Elliott Carter has always been a composer that I have a complicated relationship with. I think his ideas are so incredibly compelling and fascinating, but I don't particularly care for like the actual aesthetic, the actual sonic outcome. So I thought it would make a lot of sense to pair his ideas of structural polyrhythm and metric modulation and multiple musics happening at once with something that is really, really easy to hear for basically anyone, especially where pitch is concerned. So I used Fred Laerdal's ideas for that. I mean, my take on them and my take on Carter's too. It doesn't like actually really sound like anything either of them ever did. But Laerdal had these ideas of like these small cells of music or of material sort of gradually being added to and in a way that is very, very directly audible to listeners. Even ones that aren't like listening super, super actively or have like deep training to recognize that sort of thing. So the final project for that class was like a very simplistic kind of prototype for this idea, but I really liked it. And so I wrote a real piece using it, which ended up being this piece. Cool. Well, I look forward to experiencing it myself and trying to hear all that stuff that you're talking about. So you've talked about the nitty gritty of the musical mechanics, but what does it mean to you, and what should it mean to us? Sure. Well, so the way this piece works is there are two strains of music, which I think again are like very, very audibly different to almost anyone who could possibly be listening to it, no matter their level of like familiarity with this kind of music, or even how close attention they're paying, honestly. And one of them starts with just these kind of warm, open fifths, perfect fifths, and the other one starts with these shrill, chromatic, monodic gestures in these high, screeching winds accompanied by a snare drum. And then as the piece goes on, what happens is the sort of competing teleological drives of these two musics come into greater and greater conflict because they're kind of trying to occupy the same space and they can't really do that. They can't really accomplish their individual goals while sharing sonic space with the other. So if you think about like what these kinds of musics want to do in sort of a generic sense, like consonant fifth-spaced music, which in a very Laerdalian way gradually kind of accumulates more and more intervals and turns into this diatonic major minor system kind of tonal music. It wants to move through credential progressions and achieve tonal closure and all that kind of stuff. And then what does this chromatic music want to do? It wants to, you know, for one thing, just be loud and obnoxious, but it also wants to go through these, chromatic set transformations, inversions, retrograde, blah, 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 whatever that music tends to do. Um, and as they try to accomplish these things, they end up butting into each other and fighting each other and uh, ultimately failing to do those things that they have set out to do because of the presence of the opposing music, which culminates in this moment of just sheer brutality where they collide. And then the shrill monodic music eventually kind of just fades into enervation while the warmer, more consonant music kind of is wounded and forever changed by this experience, but it does kind of manage to accomplish some semblance of its goal. In the final section, it's kind of devolved back to just being the fifths that it opened with. It's actually the final section. That music is only 4 pitch classes. It's just the open strings of the cello, C, G, D, A. But it does kind of manage to, just by stacking those notes on top of each other differently, achieve kind of a tonal grammar and a cadence. There's kind of a 6-2-5-1 progression that creates sort of the impression of a cadence, even though it's far from a proper, tonal come and practice one. So that's what happens. And again, I really hope that I compose it in such a way that you don't have to know that in order to hear that. Okay, well, that's all very interesting. You say it's supposed to be so directly audible. If it's not, I'm going to judge you very harshly and make it known how disappointed I am. But I'm sure that won't happen. So finally, to wrap up, I'm just very curious, what does the title have to do with it? Where does that come from, if anything? What does it have to do with the meaning that you just described? What's the deal with the title? Sure. I'm hesitant to talk about this a little, but you just have a face I can't say no to. So my favorite show of all time is HBO's Deadwood, which I highly recommend to everyone, but with a massive, massive content warning for just everything that you could possibly imagine needing a content warning for. If there's a horrible thing that you can imagine, Deadwood probably depicts it. I think, purposefully, but your mileage may vary. But the overall kind of arc of this show, spoilers for a 20-year-old show, is it's about the building of this community in this lawless place. All these people who hate each other initially learn to get past their differences and work together. Despite how disturbing it is, it's very heartwarming, I think. And then you get to the 3rd season, and this character, George Hurst, shows up, and he is just, malignant, capitalistic self-interest personified. And he just ruins everything. Like, everything that the characters have spent the last 2 seasons, breaking their backs to build, he just shows up with the explicit intention to destroy. And he's extremely successful at that because he has unlimited power and resources, because he's this, monster capitalist baron who can do whatever he wants. And, again, spoilers, the climax of this final season is that the most likable, beloved character of the whole show, basically, one of the most morally upright people in the town, is just suddenly, horribly, brutally murdered by George Hurst. And that's kind of what that climax where the 2 musics collide and there's a big bass drum hit represents to me. And, after that, even though, this irreversible harm has been inflicted, the community still survives. And Hurst is expecting this to kind of break everything apart and ruin it. But what really ends up happening is that the community is galvanized and it brings everybody closer together. So, I think it's, even though he is able to inflict this horrible, irreversible damage and change the community forever, he's not able to destroy it. And so that's kind of how things play out in the music too. So to bring all this back around to the title, it's a quote from this character, George Hurst, and it's just the most terrifying villain line I can imagine. It's just about him having these inscrutable, almost like Lovecraftian plans in his head for everyone's destruction that they can't even comprehend. But I think in the context of the piece, what it really more reflects is that it is a conversation between these 2 strains of music, but it's one in which the interlocutors are not listening to or hearing each other. They're just bashing against each other. And, that results in both of them being changed and inhibited in their goals, and nothing productive comes of it. So the you in the title is kind of each other, not the audience, because I very much hope the audience can hear it. That's kind of the whole idea. All right. Interesting. Okay, well, I think that's about all the time we have. Thanks again, Len, for talking to me. This was very illuminating, and I'm very excited to hear your piece, as all of you should be as well. Please come to see it and several other amazing pieces Well, I have no evidence that this one is amazing, but I know that the other ones are. On April 21st, played by Collage New Music at MIT's Killian Hall at 8 p.m. Thank you all so much for watching.